My cat girl classmate keeps saving me a seat every lecture. He hurried into the lecture hall, late again, expecting the usual scramble for a spot. But there she was, Vesper, her earbuds in, an oversized cardigan draped over the empty chair next to her, a small, undeniable invitation in the chaos. He slid into the space she always carved for him, unaware of the universe-spanning alliance just beginning. His breath still hitched from the sprint across campus, Alden pushed through the heavy lecture hall doors. The familiar drone of hundreds of student voices washed over him, and he braced for the usual hunt for an empty spot, resigned to another hour standing at the back. Most days he simply leaned against the wall, hoping the professor would not notice his weary slump. He scanned the rows, a practiced exhaustion settling in his shoulders. Then he saw her. Vesper sat precisely 4 rows from the front, near the aisle, her black fur sleek against the pale fabric of the chair. Her headphones, a bulky, older model, covered her pointed ears, and her head tilted slightly as if listening to a private world. A single, pristine notebook rested on the seat beside her. No backpack, no jacket, just the notebook. It was a silent, unmistakable reservation. He had seen it before. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Hers were a startling, luminous green, holding his gaze for a fraction of a second. She offered a subtle inclination of her head, a gesture so faint it could have been imagined, yet he understood its meaning with absolute clarity. The empty space was for him. It always was. A tiny knot of tension in his chest eased. He moved, navigating the narrow aisle, excusing himself past knees and backpacks. He slid into the seat, the worn fabric familiar beneath him. The space was just enough, a comfortable pocket in the otherwise cramped lecture hall. Vesper did not shift, her focus unwavering on the front of the room or perhaps on whatever quiet rhythm played through her headphones. The air around them felt subtly different, a small island of calm in the academic storm. This quiet act, repeated day after day, had solidified into a ritual. He no longer questioned why. He simply accepted the unexpected gift. During the lecture, Alden found his attention drifting, not from disinterest in the complex astrophysics, but toward the figure beside him. Vesper maintained an almost unnerving stillness. Her posture was impeccable, spine straight, shoulders relaxed, hands resting lightly on her notebook. It was a stark contrast to his own slouch, a perpetual battle against the weight of long work shifts and early morning commutes. He wondered if she ever felt tired. Her green eyes, he noticed, absorbed every word, every diagram projected onto the screen with an intensity that bordered on fierce. They seemed to track the professor's movements, catching every nuance. Sometimes a tiny twitch of her ear would indicate a shift in her internal focus, a subtle processing of information. He found himself studying the fine texture of her black fur, soft and dense, observing how it seemed to capture the ambient light, giving her a quiet, almost regal presence. The oversized cardigan she always wore, a muted gray, seemed to swallow her slender frame, adding to her air of deliberate anonymity. It was as if she sought to blend, despite her striking appearance. He watched her hand move, sketching precise diagrams in her notebook, her lines clean and economical. There were no frantic scribbles, no hurried attempts to catch up. She seemed to anticipate the flow of information, capturing the essence of each concept with effortless grace. He found himself comparing her methodical approach to his own jumbled notes, a messy testament to his struggle to keep pace. The contrast was always striking. Alden often arrived late, his life a perpetual scramble. His mornings began before dawn, juggling a demanding part-time job with a full-course load. Sleep was a luxury. Finding a seat in the packed lecture hall had once been a daily source of low-grade anxiety, another battle to be fought before the real work of learning began. But Vesper's consistent gesture had changed that. It was a small thing, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but for him, it was a lifeline. He remembered the first time. He had resigned himself to standing, already mentally preparing for the ache in his feet when he saw the empty seat. He hesitated, wondering if someone else had simply left their things there. But then her eyes, those luminous green eyes, had met his, and the subtle tilt of her head had conveyed an invitation he could not ignore. He took the seat, bewildered and grateful. The next day it happened again, and the next. It became a quiet anchor in his chaotic existence, a small, unexpected kindness. He started to internalize the gesture not as a random occurrence but as something deliberate, consistent. It was a silent acknowledgement, a shared moment of understanding that transcended words. He didn't know her, not really. They had never spoken beyond an occasional shared glance. Yet this simple act spoke volumes. His mind often replayed the sequence of events. The hurried rush, the crowded hallway, the dread of the full lecture hall. Then the sight of her, headphones on, that single notebook, the empty seat. The quiet relief that washed over him was profound. It was more than just a place to sit. It was a moment of calm, a tiny sanctuary in the relentless grind of his day. Her presence, her quiet certainty, had become a subtle comfort. He started noticing other small things. How she never made eye contact with anyone else in the room. How she moved with a quiet efficiency, never bumping into others, always seeming to anticipate their movements. She was an enigma, wrapped in an oversized cardigan, her headphones a barrier to the outside world, yet she consistently carved out a space for him. The thought brought a faint, unbidden smile to his lips. The idea of reciprocating never quite formed, not directly. How did one reciprocate a silent, daily kindness from someone so self-contained? He did not know her schedule, her other classes. He only knew she was there, waiting, every Tuesday and Thursday morning. It wasn't an obligation, he knew that. She could stop any time, but she never did. Gradually, subtly, his routine began to shift. He still hurried, still navigated the chaos, but now there was a different undercurrent to his rush. He found himself looking for her, not just for the seat, though that was part of it, but for her. He would scan the hallway as he approached the lecture hall, a faint, almost imperceptible anticipation building in his chest. Had she arrived yet? Would she be there? The lecture hall still felt overwhelming, but the prospect of seeing Vesper, of finding that quietly reserved seat, transformed the experience. It became something to look forward to, a small beacon in the often monotonous rhythm of his academic week. The thought of that luminous green gaze, the slight tilt of her head, propelled him forward. A connection, as fragile as it was profound, had begun to form. He still scanned the hallway, now with a conscious effort, searching for the familiar shape of her head, the slight sheen of her black fur. The anticipation had solidified into something he acknowledged, a quiet hum beneath the daily grind. This particular Tuesday had been brutal. A missed alarm, a spilled coffee, a looming deadline for a project he barely understood. He felt frayed, a live wire buzzing with exhaustion and frustration. As he navigated the crowded lecture hall, the sight of Vesper already seated, her headphones a familiar halo, brought an immediate, potent wave of relief. The empty chair beside her, guarded by her single notebook, was a balm. He slid into it, exhaling slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. The lecture droned on, a blur of complex equations and theoretical frameworks. Alden found himself watching Vesper more than usual. Her posture remained perfect, her green eyes unwavering on the projection. She absorbed everything, her pen moving with a silent, precise rhythm. It struck him then how much her presence had come to mean. It wasn't just the seat. It was the quiet certainty she offered, the small, consistent anchor in his otherwise turbulent schedule. When the lecture ended, a rare surge of gratitude compelled him. He gathered his things slowly, waiting for the usual rush of students to thin. Vesper, as always, remained seated, seemingly oblivious to the departing crowd, her headphones still in place. He hesitated, then took a breath. "Vesper," he began, his voice a low mumble against the receding chatter. "Thank you for the seat. Always." Her head tilted slightly. Her green eyes, usually so intense, flickered to his face, a momentary widening of her pupils. Then something subtle but profound shifted. The fur around her ears, a rich, deep black, seemed to darken, absorbing the light. A faint blush, barely perceptible against her dark complexion, spread across her high cheekbones. It was fleeting, a quick wash of color that vanished almost as soon as he registered it. She gave a quick, almost jerky nod, a silent acknowledgement. Without another word, she was on her feet, moving with that characteristic quiet efficiency. She slipped between the last few lingering students, her earbuds still firmly in place, and was gone before Alden could formulate another sentence. He watched her disappear, a strange mix of confusion and mild embarrassment washing over him. Had he said something wrong? Her reaction was so immediate, so complete, a retreat rather than an interaction. He had expected a word, a small smile, anything more than that fleeting blush and a silent exit. It only deepened the enigma that was Vesper. He had only wanted to express a simple kindness, to acknowledge her consistent gesture. Instead, he felt as if he had stumbled upon a hidden mechanism, triggering an unexpected response. In the days that followed, Alden found himself observing Vesper with renewed focus, not just in the lecture hall but across campus. He noticed her patterns, subtle clues that began to paint a picture of her self-contained world. She rarely lingered in crowded spaces. After class, while most students spilled into the hallways, laughing and chatting, Vesper would often wait. She would sit patiently, sometimes for several minutes, until the flow of bodies thinned to a trickle. Only then would she rise, moving with that same quiet grace, navigating the quieter corridors. He saw her once in the campus cafeteria, a vast, echoing space filled with the cacophony of hundreds of conversations and clattering trays. She stood near the entrance, her shoulders slightly hunched, her gaze scanning the room with an almost desperate intensity. She didn't buy food. She simply stood as if waiting for someone or something, then slowly retreated, disappearing back into the stream of students without entering the main eating area. It was a stark contrast to her quiet confidence in the lecture hall, where she sat, focused and unmoving amidst the chaos. He started seeing her in the library too, always in the most secluded corners. Not the main study areas, but tucked away between towering shelves in the archives, or at a single-person carrel facing a window, far from the main traffic. Her headphones were a constant fixture, a barrier she maintained between herself and the surrounding world. It was as if the sheer volume of sensory input, the constant chatter, the movement, the noise, was overwhelming to her. He realized her preference for quiet wasn't just a quirk, it seemed to be a fundamental need. This observation, this quiet recognition of her struggle, stirred a different kind of empathy within him. The girl who reserved his seat wasn't just mysterious, she was vulnerable in ways he hadn't considered. One Thursday, after another lecture had concluded, Alden gathered his books, the image of Vesper's retreating figure still fresh in his mind. He glanced at the desk they shared, a habit now. His eyes caught on something small, nestled against the edge of the tabletop. It wasn't a pen or a stray paper. It was a charm intricately carved from what looked like dark, polished wood. It was no larger than his thumb, depicting a stylized, flowing symbol that he couldn't quite identify. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the lines smooth and deliberate, almost glowing with an inner light. He picked it up gently, his thumb tracing the cool, smooth surface. It felt ancient, yet oddly delicate. He knew instantly it wasn't his. He never carried such things, and no one else sat in their immediate vicinity. It had to be Vesper's. She had been sitting there moments before, her meticulous note-taking a familiar sight. She must have dropped it, or perhaps it had slipped from a pocket while she was gathering her own sparse belongings. A new purpose, distinct from merely finding his seat, solidified in Alden's mind. He had to return it. It wasn't just a lost item, it felt personal, a small piece of the enigma that was Vesper now resting in his palm. Returning it would be a small act of reciprocity, a way to acknowledge her without the awkwardness of his previous attempt at thanks. It was a concrete goal, something tangible he could do. He would find her, he would give it back. The decision brought a surprising sense of resolve, a quiet determination that felt both novel and right. The charm, warm from his touch, felt like a silent promise of connection. He decided to search the library first. Vesper often sought quiet corners, and the vast, echoing halls of the campus library offered precisely that. Alden walked with a new purpose, his gaze sweeping over the rows of study carrels and reading tables. He moved slowly, not wanting to startle her, his fingers occasionally brushing the smooth wooden charm nestled in his palm. It felt like a small, warm secret. He passed students engrossed in their work, the low murmur of whispered conversations a constant backdrop. Then he saw her. Vesper sat at a secluded table tucked away near the back, an area usually overlooked. Her back was to the main aisle, her posture perfectly straight, her head bowed over a stack of technical journals. Her black fur was a striking contrast against the pale wood of the table. Her omnipresent earbuds were in, a barrier against the world. Alden's breath hitched slightly. The moment felt significant, almost delicate. He approached cautiously, his footsteps muffled by the carpet. He stopped a few feet from her table, the charm still warm in his hand. He waited for her to look up, unwilling to interrupt her intense concentration. After a long moment, she shifted, her luminous green eyes flicking up, meeting his. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly followed by a soft curiosity. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze dropping to his hand. Alden extended his arm, offering the charm. He didn't speak, not wanting to break the quiet sanctity of the library or the delicate space between them. His heart thumped a slow rhythm against his ribs. Vesper's eyes widened a fraction, then softened with unmistakable surprise and a deep, quiet gratitude. She reached out, her fingers brushing his as she gently took the small, intricately carved wood from his palm. The brief contact sent a jolt through Alden, a spark of unexpected warmth. Her fur around her ears darkened slightly, a faint blush he now recognized. She held the charm, turning it over in her slender fingers, her gaze fixed on the familiar symbol. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. She looked up at him again, her green eyes conveying a silent, profound thank you. He gestured vaguely to the empty chair opposite her. She nodded, a gesture of quiet invitation that mirrored her daily ritual in the lecture hall. Alden slid into the seat, placing his bag on the floor beside him. He pulled out his own textbook, though his mind was far from the assigned reading. He watched her for a moment, discreetly. Vesper tucked the charm carefully into a small pouch she wore around her neck, a place he hadn't noticed before. It was clearly a cherished item. They settled into a shared silence, the soft rustle of turning pages and the distant whispers of other students filling the space. Alden found himself observing her, no longer just a distant, intriguing presence, but someone with whom he had just shared a moment of genuine connection. He noticed the way her gaze swept across the complex diagrams in her journals, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her focus was absolute, an almost unnerving intensity that made his own study habits seem scattershot by comparison. He opened his history textbook, trying to pull his thoughts back to the ancient civilizations he was meant to be studying. Yet, his attention kept drifting. He found himself thinking about a particularly dense lecture from earlier that week, one filled with obscure historical dates and complex socioeconomic theories. He had struggled to keep up, his notes a chaotic mess of half-formed ideas. He wondered if Vesper had faced similar difficulties. Then a thought occurred to him. He remembered a specific, detailed fact mentioned in passing by the professor, a fact he had entirely missed. He decided to test his memory, or perhaps to test his understanding of Vesper. He leaned forward slightly, speaking in a low voice, barely above a whisper. Professor Thorne mentioned the pre-Caledonian trade routes yesterday, Alden said, keeping his tone neutral. I missed the specific date of their collapse. Do you happen to remember? Vesper's head snapped up, her green eyes meeting his. She paused for a moment, her gaze unblinking. Then, without opening her textbook or consulting her notes, she responded. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, a quiet counterpoint to the library's hushed atmosphere. The final collapse of the major pre-Caledonian trade network, primarily involving the solar systems of Xylos Prime and Zethos, occurred in the fifth galactic cycle, standard Terran equivalent of 1827. It was precipitated by the destabilization of gravitational lensing currents, not political upheaval as commonly believed. Alden stared at her, genuinely stunned. Her recall was not just perfect, it was enhanced, providing details the professor had only briefly glossed over. She had recited it like a factual entry from an encyclopedia, her precision unwavering. His own notes were filled with question marks next to that topic. She had not only remembered the date, but also added clarifying, crucial context. It was as if she had absorbed the information on a deeper, more fundamental level. Wow, Alden breathed, a genuine admiration in his voice. That's incredibly specific. I barely remembered the name Caledonian. A faint, almost shy smile touched Vesper's lips. She dipped her head slightly, a gesture that conveyed both modesty and a quiet acknowledgement of her ability. She didn't elaborate, simply returning her attention to her own journals. Alden, however, felt a new wave of intrigue wash over him. Her quiet intensity in class, her meticulous note-taking, it wasn't just diligence. It was something more profound, a unique method of learning that set her apart. He found himself adjusting in his seat, pushing his own book slightly to the side. He created a small, empty space on the table between them, an unconscious echo of her daily gesture in the lecture hall. It felt natural, a quiet offering of shared space, a subtle mirroring of the comfort she had provided him. He noticed her green eyes flick to the newly cleared space, a brief, unreadable expression crossing her face before she returned to her work. Alden spent the next hour in a state of quiet fascination. He occasionally caught her glancing his way, her eyes quick and assessing before she would return to her studies. He realized he wasn't just studying her actions. He was studying her presence, the way she existed in the world. Her movements were economical, her concentration unwavering. He tried to focus on his own work, but the quiet hum of her intellect, her unique way of processing information, was a more compelling subject. A small, almost imperceptible vibration disturbed the quiet. Vesper stiffened slightly, her movements freezing. Alden watched as she subtly reached into her oversized cardigan, her fingers brushing against something tucked deep within a pocket. She pulled out a small, sleek device, no larger than her palm. It was unlike any comm unit or tablet Alden had ever seen. Its surface was smooth, dark, and seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. There were no visible buttons or screens, only a faint, pulsing light that shimmered beneath its surface. Vesper held it discreetly under the table, her head still bowed, as if merely adjusting her posture. Her thumb moved with practiced ease over its smooth casing. Alden watched her face, his gaze sharpened by the sudden shift in her demeanor. Her green eyes, usually so serene, now held a fleeting shadow of concern, a subtle tension around her jaw. It was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, masked by a rapid return to her composed, impassive expression. But Alden had seen it. The brief flicker of unease, the barely contained worry. She quickly returned the device to her pocket, her movements fluid and practiced. She resumed her study, her gaze once again fixed on her journal. Yet the absolute focus had been momentarily fractured. Alden felt a prickle of curiosity, a deeper sense of intrigue. The girl who reserved his seat, the one with the extraordinary recall, was more than just a quiet classmate. There was a hidden depth to her presence, a complexity he had only begun to glimpse. The small device, her fleeting reaction, hinted at a secret life, a world beyond the confines of campus lectures and library study sessions. He wondered what kind of message could elicit such a subtle but profound shift in her usually calm demeanor. The warmth from the charm in his pocket had been replaced by a quiet chill of mystery, a sudden realization that Vesper was far more enigmatic than he had ever imagined. He felt a quiet resolve solidify within him, an instinct to understand, to know the secrets that lay beneath her quiet exterior. The next morning, Alden set his alarm an hour earlier. He arrived at the lecture hall well before the first trickle of students, a sensation alien to his usual hurried entrance. He chose their usual spot, 4 rows from the front, and deliberately left the seat beside him empty. It felt strange, almost presumptuous, to claim the space she always provided. He settled in, his gaze fixed on the entrance, a quiet anticipation building in his chest, replacing the familiar anxiety. Minutes later, Vesper appeared. Her movements were as precise as ever, her black fur sleek beneath the muted lighting of the hallway. She paused at the entrance, her green eyes scanning the room with their usual careful assessment. Then they landed on him on the empty chair. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly softening into something akin to quiet pleasure. A faint blush, less pronounced than before, touched her ears. She offered a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement before gliding to the seat he had saved. The routine was no longer hers alone. It was now shared, a quiet, mutual understanding. During the lecture, Alden found his attention divided. He still took diligent notes, but he was acutely aware of Vesper beside him. He noticed the way her ear twitched almost imperceptibly at a particularly loud cough from the back of the room, or how her gaze would occasionally drift to the window as if seeking a quieter vista. The device, the one she had hidden yesterday, was a constant, unspoken question in his mind. After the lecture, as the room emptied, Alden hesitated. Vesper, as always, gathered her things with unhurried precision, her earbuds still in. He took a breath. "Vesper," he began, his voice softer than he intended. She turned, pulling one earbud out, her green eyes questioning. "I just wanted to say thank you," Alden continued, gesturing vaguely to the now empty seat, "for always saving this spot, and for yesterday with the charm." Vesper's tail gave a slight, almost imperceptible flick. "It was nothing," she replied, her voice soft, with a subtle, melodic lilt he hadn't noticed before. "You needed it." Still, Alden insisted, a small smile touching his lips. "It means a lot. And your help with that history question yesterday, it was incredible. Your recall is really something." Vesper's gaze met his, unwavering. "My people have a different way of absorbing information," she said, her tone even but with an underlying hint of something profound. "It is less about memorization, more about direct integration." Alden felt a jolt of intrigue. "Your people? Are you an exchange student?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. She hesitated, her gaze drifting for a moment to the deserted hallway outside the lecture hall. "Yes, from Kalen." Kalen. The name was unfamiliar, even to his extensive knowledge of interstellar politics and stellar cartography. He'd never heard of a planetary system by that designation in any Earth-based astronomical catalog. "Kalen," he repeated, trying to place it. "I don't think I've ever seen it listed in our star charts." Vesper offered a small, almost imperceptible shrug. "It is far beyond your known systems. Our passage here is complex." She paused, then continued, her voice gaining a quiet intensity. "We perceive and process data differently. What you call recall is, for us, a natural state of understanding, a connection to the flow of information itself." Alden considered this, his mind racing. It explained so much: her quiet focus, her effortless grasp of complex subjects, the way she seemed to absorb the entire lecture without a single wasted movement. "So you don't just learn things, you become part of them," he mused aloud. "In a manner of speaking," she confirmed. "It allows for a deep, intuitive grasp of patterns and connections. Your history, for instance, is a vast network of interconnected events, motivations, and consequences. We learn by sensing the structure, rather than just memorizing discrete facts." "That's incredible," Alden breathed, genuinely awestruck. "It explains why you don't seem to struggle with anything." He thought of his own laborious study methods, the endless rereading and revision. It must make studying so much easier. Vesper's expression softened, a hint of something wistful in her green eyes. "It has its own challenges," she admitted. "The constant influx of information can be overwhelming, especially here." She gestured vaguely around the campus, then at her earbuds. Alden's mind immediately connected her words to his observations. Her avoidance of crowds, the headphones, her preference for quiet spaces. "Is that why you wear the earbuds? And why you avoid crowded places?" he asked gently, careful not to pry too deeply. She nodded, a rare vulnerability showing on her composed face. "Earth is vibrant," she said, her lips twisting into a small, wry smile, "but also very loud. Your cities vibrate with countless signals, your people communicate with such intense energy, so many distinct sounds, lights, scents. For us, it is like being immersed in a constant deluge. A deluge of information, Alden clarified, trying to understand. And sensory input, Vesper confirmed. Every conversation, every vehicle, every ambient sound, every visual stimulus. Our senses are finely tuned to process subtle shifts in our environment on Kalen, where things are much more muted, organized. Here, it is a constant bombardment. My hatred of crowds, as you might perceive it, is simply a way to manage the sensory overload, to find pockets of quiet where I can filter and process. She gestured to the empty lecture hall, a small, safe haven. Alden felt a wave of empathy wash over him. He had always seen her quietness as a choice, a preference for solitude. Now he understood it was a fundamental need, a coping mechanism for a world that assaulted her senses. The earbuds were not just for music, they were a shield. Her averted gaze in crowded hallways was not disinterest, but a desperate attempt to reduce the overwhelming visual input. So the device, Alden began, remembering the small, dark object from yesterday. Was that related to the overload? Vesper hesitated again, her tail flicking once more. It was a message from Kalen, she admitted, her voice dropping slightly. A priority communication. But even that, when received amidst the usual earth static, can be jarring. She met his gaze, a profound trust shining in her eyes. My people value quiet. We thrive in environments where information can be absorbed without constant external distraction. Earth is a challenge, but also a fascinating study. Alden felt a profound shift within him. The enigma of Vesper was beginning to unravel, revealing not just an alien, but a being with unique sensitivities and vulnerabilities. Her quiet intensity was not aloofness, but a profound engagement with the world, filtered through a different kind of perception. The thought of her navigating the cacophony of Earth, constantly battling sensory overload, filled him with a protective warmth. It must be incredibly difficult, he said, his voice soft with genuine concern. To live like that, constantly trying to filter everything out. Vesper gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It is why I appreciate the quiet spaces you find, she said, her green eyes holding his. And the seat you save. Her small, shy smile was more open than he had ever seen it. It helps, more than you know. Alden felt a deep connection solidify between them, a bond forged not just in shared space, but in a nascent understanding of her hidden world. He saw her not as a mysterious classmate, but as a resilient individual navigating an alien environment with quiet strength. His resolve to understand her, to know her secrets, had transformed into something deeper, a desire to support her, to ease her journey however he could. The quiet chill of mystery had given way to a profound, warm empathy. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that their connection was just beginning. Alden knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that their connection was just beginning. He walked beside Vesper after their next lecture, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the campus pathways. He felt a quiet contentment in her presence, a warmth that had replaced the earlier mystery. They were heading towards the main parking lot, Vesper's pace measured, her eyes scanning the surroundings with that familiar, subtle vigilance. Alden wondered if she was still filtering the constant sensory input, even now. A sudden, sharp screech tore through the air from the parking lot ahead. It was followed by the sickening crunch of metal. Alden flinched, his head snapping towards the sound. A small, older sedan, its front fender crumpled, spun out of control near the lot's entrance, veering wildly towards a group of students waiting by a row of parked cars. A loose shopping cart, previously used by a student loading groceries, broke free from its tether, rolling rapidly and erratically, picking up speed directly in the path of the panicked students. Time seemed to stretch. The cart, a heavy metal cage, bounced over a curb, now a dangerous projectile. It was heading straight for a young woman engrossed in her data slate, unaware of the impending impact. Alden's breath caught. He started to move, a futile instinct, knowing he was too far. Then Vesper moved. It was not a run, it was a blur. One moment she was beside him, the next she was a streak of black fur and oversized cardigan, covering 20 feet in what felt like less than a second. Her movements were fluid, impossibly fast, a grace born of incredible strength and precision. She didn't stop the cart head-on. Instead, she intercepted its trajectory, a hand flashing out to make contact with its side. The impact was barely audible, a soft thud, but the cart spun instantly, its momentum redirected. It harmlessly glanced off a parked vehicle, rattling to a stop against its tires, nowhere near the startled students. The young woman looked up, confused, then glanced at the cart, then at the sedan, completely oblivious to her near miss. The other students were already reacting to the car crash, shouting questions, moving towards the wreckage. No one had noticed Vesper's impossible intervention. No one but Alden. Vesper was already retreating, her movements now deliberately casual, blending back into the edge of the crowd. Her fur, Alden noticed, bristled faintly around her ears, a subtle sign of agitation. Her green eyes darted around, assessing, confirming that her action had indeed gone unnoticed by anyone else. She rejoined Alden, her breathing perfectly even, her composure almost entirely restored. Almost. Alden remained rooted to the spot, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. The speed, the precision, the sheer impossibility of it. He looked at Vesper, who was now subtly urging him forward with a slight tilt of her head, her gaze fixed straight ahead, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. "Vesper," he began, his voice a little hoarse. "What was that?" She walked faster, pulling him gently by the arm. "It was nothing," she said, her voice low, a clear plea for silence. "An accident. No one was hurt." "You," Alden insisted, keeping his voice quiet, "you moved like I've never seen anyone move like that. You stopped that cart. You saved that student." His mind replayed the scene, the undeniable speed. This was not just fast, it was beyond human capability. Vesper sighed, a soft, almost inaudible sound. She led him away from the main thoroughfare, towards a less populated section of the campus gardens, where the noise of the crash was already fading. She stopped beneath a large, old oak, turning to face him. Her green eyes held a new depth, a mixture of resignation and a trust that warmed Alden. "I am not merely an exchange student, Alden," she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it resonated with a profound significance. "My presence here is part of a Kalenite observation mission." Alden felt a jolt. He had known she was alien, but observation mission carried a weight he hadn't anticipated. "A mission," he repeated, trying to keep his tone neutral though his heart hammered. "What kind of mission?" Vesper looked up at the leaves of the oak tree, then back at him. "My people, the Kalenites, face a silent, creeping threat," she explained. "We call it the Vordax. It is not an enemy that uses weapons or overt aggression. The Vordax assimilates. It absorbs the unique cultural knowledge, the very essence of other civilizations. It neutralizes their distinctive traits, leaving them homogeneous, stripped of identity." Alden listened, captivated, a chill running down his spine. A threat that erased culture. It was insidious, terrifying, and Earth, he asked, sensing the connection. "Earth," Vesper continued, her gaze earnest, "is a vibrant, diverse planet. Your human culture is incredibly rich, resilient, and constantly evolving. My people are searching for specific cultural knowledge here, knowledge vital for our own survival against the Vordax." She lowered her eyes slightly, her tail flicking with a nervous energy he now understood. "My physical abilities, what you just witnessed, are a natural part of Kalenite physiology. We are faster, stronger, our senses highly refined. But these are tools. The true purpose of my presence, our mission, is to understand and learn from humanity." She met his gaze directly, a raw vulnerability in her luminous eyes. "My being here, navigating this overwhelming environment, is a desperate, covert plea for understanding. a search for the very resilience that allows your species to thrive amidst constant change and external pressures. We need to find the keys to cultural preservation before the vortex extinguishes kaolinite identity forever. Alden stood there, absorbing her words, the magnitude of her revelation settling over him. This wasn't just about an alien classmate needing help with sensory overload. This was about the survival of an entire civilization, a race of beings who, despite their advanced physiology, faced an existential threat that resonated deeply with the human experience of cultural loss. His quiet classmate, with her reserved seat and gentle nods, was a scout on a mission of immense importance, a fragile bridge between two worlds. His empathy, already profound, deepened into something more. It was a sense of awe, a burgeoning respect for the weight she carried, and an immediate, fierce desire to help. He thought of her in the crowded lecture halls, battling the noise, her every action a silent struggle. Now he understood the true stakes. So Alden said, his voice firm, a new resolve hardening his tone, "You're looking for something specific. Something that can help your people resist this vortex." Vesper nodded slowly, a hint of hope entering her eyes. "Yes, we believe Earth holds unique examples of cultural resilience, historical narratives, perhaps even specific artifacts that could be integrated into kaolinite society. A form of cultural inoculation, if you will." A profound sense of purpose ignited within Alden. His quiet life, his routine of classes and part-time jobs, suddenly felt connected to something far grander. He wasn't just saving a seat anymore. He was a potential ally in an interstellar struggle. He had spent his life observing, learning, meticulously organizing information. Perhaps his own quiet strengths, his own human cultural knowledge, could be valuable. The warmth between them solidified into a palpable understanding, a shared secret that bound them together. The quiet chill of mystery was gone, replaced by the blazing fire of a shared, urgent mission. "The Vordax do not conquer with fleets," Vesper began, her voice quiet but resonant in the secluded garden. "They absorb. They integrate. Imagine a river flowing into another, but instead of blending, the second river's unique properties are slowly, subtly neutralized. Its color, its temperature, its very composition become indistinguishable from the first. That is what the Vordax do to cultures." Alden listened, picturing her analogy. It was a chilling concept, far more insidious than any invasion he could have imagined. Physical conquest left ruins. Cultural absorption left nothing but a hollow echo. "They target the core identifiers," Vesper continued. "The stories, the art, the rituals, the unique ways of thinking that define a people. Kaolinites are highly interconnected. Our society thrives on shared understanding and direct integration of information. This strength becomes our vulnerability against the Vordax. Their influence is like a silent frequency, overriding our own, slowly dissolving our distinct kaolinite identity from within." A shiver traced Alden's spine. He thought of his own culture, the vast tapestry of human history, its countless traditions and beliefs. The idea of losing that, not through war but through a slow, quiet erasure, was profoundly unsettling. "Why Earth?" Alden asked, the question heavy with the gravity of her explanation. "What makes us different?" Vesper turned her luminous green eyes to him. "Your world, Alden, is a paradox. It is chaotic, vibrant, often discordant, yet it possesses an extraordinary capacity for cultural resilience. Humanity has faced countless crises, both internal and external, and time and again your cultures have adapted, persisted, and even flourished. You invent, you memorialize, you rebuild, you remember. You fight to retain your distinctiveness, even in the face of immense pressure." Alden considered this. He had always been fascinated by the smaller, often overlooked pockets of human history, the narratives of resilience in forgotten communities, the way traditions were carried forward against all odds. His academic pursuits, which often felt niche and solitary, suddenly held a new, universal significance. He remembered a paper he wrote on a remote village that had preserved its unique language and customs through centuries of political upheaval, using only its oral traditions and a few hidden texts. "We believe," Vesper said, her gaze fixed on him, "that Earth holds the keys to a form of cultural inoculation. Specific examples, specific narratives, perhaps even specific methods of preservation that we can adapt and integrate into Kalenite society. A way to reinforce our own cultural frequency against the Vordax's nullifying influence." Alden felt a surge of understanding. His mind, usually a repository for dates and historical facts, began to connect threads he had never seen before. His meticulous note-taking, his passion for digging through obscure archives, his innate ability to organize vast amounts of disparate information, these weren't just academic quirks. They were precisely the skills Vesper needed. His quiet, analytical mind, so accustomed to observing and cataloging the human experience, suddenly felt potent. He remembered her initial discomfort with Earth's sensory input, her need for quiet spaces. He had seen her vulnerability, but now he saw her strength, the immense burden she carried. His empathy deepened, transforming into a fierce protectiveness, a desire to lend his specific human talents to her desperate cause. "I think I understand," Alden said, his voice measured but firm. "My focus has always been on cultural preservation, particularly the less obvious examples. The stories that aren't in the main textbooks, the communities that fought to keep their identity alive through quiet acts of defiance. I spend my days in libraries, in archives, sifting through forgotten histories." Vesper's ears twitched slightly, a subtle sign of her attention. Hope flickered in her green eyes. "My notebooks," Alden continued, a slight, almost shy smile touching his lips. "They're not just for class. They're filled with observations, cross-references, theories about how cultures persist. I've always found patterns in human resilience, even in the most unlikely places. Perhaps what I've been studying without even realizing it is exactly what you need." The warmth between them intensified, a quiet acknowledgement of their unexpected, yet perfectly matched, alliance. He saw how his own strengths, so mundane in his own world, could be extraordinary in hers. Vesper reached into a hidden pocket of her oversized cardigan. She produced the small, unfamiliar device Alden had glimpsed before. Its surface was smooth, dark, reflecting no light. With a subtle gesture, a soft glow emanated from it, resolving into a complex display of symbols and swirling patterns. It was Kalenite script, intricate and beautiful, interspersed with what looked like fragmented images and schematics. "This data," Vesper explained, her voice lowered, a hint of urgency now present, "is what we have managed to salvage from a compromised Kalenite archive. It hints at a specific type of cultural anchor on Earth. Not a single artifact, but a kind of knowledge, a methodology, perhaps even a series of practices, that has historically allowed human cultures to resist erasure." She manipulated the device, and a section of the display brightened. It showed a series of abstract historical markers, dates and locations, all pointing towards periods of intense cultural pressure on Earth. There were also complex algorithms, correlating human societal structures with instances of prolonged cultural integrity. "My people lacked the precise understanding to interpret these fragments fully," she admitted, her gaze meeting his. Her green eyes were earnest, vulnerable, holding the weight of her civilization's future. "Our direct integration system struggles with the nuanced, often contradictory nature of human historical data. We need someone who understands the human cultural psyche, someone who can navigate the subtleties, the hidden meanings, the unwritten rules." She held the device out to him, the soft glow illuminating her face. "Alden, I need your help. Can you help me decipher this? Can you help me find what Earth has to teach Kalen before it is too late?" His breath caught. This wasn't just an offer of assistance. It was a plea, a profound trust placed in him, a human by an alien on a mission of cosmic importance. The quiet thrill of mystery was replaced by a deep, unwavering sense of purpose. He reached for the device, his fingers brushing hers, a silent pact forged between them. Their shared mission had begun in earnest. Alden held the device, its soft light pulsing in his palm, a direct link to a civilization teetering on the brink. He felt the gravity of Vesper's trust, a silent weight settling into his core. His fingers traced the smooth surface of the alien technology, then he looked up at her, a quiet determination hardening his gaze. "Where do we start?" he asked, his voice steady. Vesper retrieved the device, activating a new display. The data points to periods of significant human cultural stress. My people categorize these as cultural nexus points, where identity was either forged or fractured. We lack the subjective context to understand the why. Alden nodded, a familiar spark igniting within him. This was his territory. Human history isn't always logical. Sometimes the most profound resilience comes from the most unexpected places. Small communities, forgotten traditions. He spent the next few days immersed in his research, a whirlwind of digital archives and dusty microfiches. His university ID granted him access to the campus's deeper historical records, a labyrinth of forgotten knowledge. He navigated the quiet halls of the Special Collections Library, the hushed whispers of forgotten eras surrounding him. He cross-referenced kaolinite data markers with Earth's historical timelines, searching for anomalies. Vesper often sat beside him, her presence a quiet anchor, observing his methods with keen interest. She learned his system of cross-referencing, the way he would skip over grand narratives to focus on community records and personal accounts. He found it in the uncatalogued digital archive of the local historical society, tucked away amidst a collection of 20th-century community newsletters. It was a scanned copy of an old, leather-bound journal, titled The Chronicle of the Solstice Siege by Ilara Vance. It detailed the aftermath of a localized, devastating viral outbreak that swept through a regional population during a global crisis almost 2 centuries ago. The official records focused on recovery efforts and economic impact. Vance's journal, however, documented the cultural response. It spoke of shared storytelling, communal music circles, the revival of forgotten crafts, and the deliberate creation of new, unifying rituals during a time of profound isolation and loss. Alden felt a jolt of recognition. "This is it," he murmured, pointing to a passage on the screen. "Look here." Vance writes about how the official aid provided necessities, but it was the shared stories, the songs, the collective memory that rebuilt their spirit. She calls it cultural inoculation through shared narrative. They didn't just survive, they redefined themselves stronger. Vesper leaned closer, her green eyes scanning the translated text on the kaolinite device. "Shared narrative," she repeated, the words foreign on her tongue, yet resonating with kaolinite concepts of interconnectedness. Our data indicated a high correlation between sustained cultural integrity and narrative cohesion in human societies. But we interpreted narrative cohesion as a shared history. Vance describes it as a shared process of creating history together. They moved their base of operations to a secluded corner of the library, surrounded by stacks of ancient texts. The soft glow of the kaolinite device illuminated their faces as they worked, side by side, for hours. Alden would interpret the nuances of human historical context, explaining why a seemingly insignificant folk tale held deep cultural weight, or how a local festival, once nearly forgotten, became a symbol of defiance. Vesper, in turn, fed the kaolinite data into their analysis, highlighting the precise algorithmic patterns that correlated with periods of cultural strength. "This part," Vesper said, pointing to a sequence of kaolinite symbols, suggests a pattern of reciprocal exchange within the human social fabric during these periods. We interpreted it as trade agreements, resource sharing." Alden shook his head gently. "It's more than that, Vesper. Vance's journal talks about families sharing heirloom recipes, neighbors teaching each other lost skills, even children creating new games from salvaged materials. It wasn't about economic exchange. It was about the act of sharing, the mutual vulnerability, the conscious effort to recreate connection when everything else was falling apart. It's a reciprocal exchange of identity. Their conversations flowed easily, a seamless blend of his human insight and her alien data analysis. Alden found himself sharing his own thoughts on humanity's often contradictory nature, our capacity for both great destruction and profound compassion. Vesper listened intently, her occasional questions precise and insightful, revealing a deep curiosity about the species she was studying. Kalenites, Vesper began one evening, her voice softer than usual, her gaze distant. We live in a state of profound interconnectedness. Our thoughts, our experiences are not truly private. We have a shared consciousness, a collective memory that flows through every Kalenite. It allows for incredible efficiency, rapid learning, a complete absence of loneliness. Alden listened, captivated. He imagined a world without individual isolation, a constant flow of shared existence. But it is also our greatest vulnerability against the vortex, she continued, her voice tinged with a quiet sorrow. When the vortex assimilate a culture, they sever those connections. They don't destroy bodies, they erase identity. They introduce subtle discord, fractured thoughts, until the collective memory becomes a cacophony, then silence. A Kalenite without connection is not truly Kalenite. It is a shell. Alden felt a profound ache in his chest. He had understood the vortex as a threat to a civilization, but not to the very essence of being. He saw the silent fear in Vesper's luminous green eyes, the personal weight of her people's imminent demise. He imagined his own world, his own thoughts, being slowly unraveled, the connections to his family, his friends, his history, all dissolving into nothingness. That's why Earth's resilience is so vital, Vesper explained, her voice regaining a spark of hope. Your individual narratives, your distinct expressions of identity, even within a shared culture. It is a defense we do not possess. Vance's journal describes how humans deliberately created new narratives, new shared experiences, to rebuild their sense of self. They chose to remember, they chose to create, even when survival was uncertain. Alden reached out, his hand hovering for a moment, then gently rested on her arm. Her fur was soft beneath his fingers. He felt a surge of warmth, a deep, protective instinct rising within him. This was no longer just an academic pursuit or even a cosmic mission. This was about saving Vesper's people, about preserving something infinitely precious. He realized the quiet, solitary student who reserved a seat for him had become a beacon, not just for Kalen, but for him. "We'll find it, Vesper," he promised, his voice low, firm. "Whatever it is, whatever cultural secret humanity holds, we'll uncover it, together." Vesper looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face, her green eyes filled with an emotion Alden recognized as gratitude, but also something deeper, something akin to comfort. The library's quiet hum seemed to fade, replaced by the steady rhythm of their shared breathing, two disparate beings united by a common, desperate cause, their connection deepening with every passing moment. Their alliance had truly become an unbreakable bond, forged in the quiet fire of shared purpose. Alden's hand remained on Vesper's arm, a silent anchor in the quiet library. The weight of their mission pressed, now intertwined with the fragile hope he saw in her eyes. He removed his hand slowly, the warmth lingering. He turned back to the scattered papers on their table, the open journal. Ilara Vance's careful script seemed to mock them with its distant wisdom. Vesper's ears twitched, a subtle movement Alden now recognized as a sign of heightened awareness. Her gaze drifted across the quiet study area, then narrowed on their table. Alden followed her line of sight. Nothing seemed amiss. He had just organized their notes moments before. "Something is different," Vesper whispered, her voice a low vibration. She leaned closer to a stack of their reference books, her green eyes scanning the spines. Then she pointed to a specific volume, a dusty history of local architecture. It was one Alden had pulled hours ago, but now a small, almost imperceptible scratch marred its cover. The scratch formed a symbol, stark against the faded leather. It was not an earth symbol. Alden felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He recognized it from the kaolinite data Vesper had shown him. It was a vortex marker, a silent declaration. They knew. "How long have you been looking at this book, Alden?" Vesper asked, her voice steady despite the tremor Alden sensed beneath it. "I put it back 15 minutes ago before we talked," he replied, his gaze locked on the symbol. It wasn't there then. His heart pounded with a sudden, fierce rhythm. This wasn't just about saving Kalen anymore. This was a direct threat. The Vordax were here on campus, watching. Vesper's fur bristled slightly, a reaction Alden understood as alarm. They are aware. This is a direct communication, a warning or perhaps a challenge. She looked at Alden, her eyes reflecting a profound, ancient fear. My covert status is compromised. My presence here is no longer hidden. Alden felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. He had known the risks were abstract, theoretical. Now they were concrete, etched into a library book. His involvement was no longer academic. It was dangerous. But the thought of abandoning Vesper, of leaving her to face this alone, was impossible. He saw her vulnerability, the weight of her entire civilization resting on her shoulders. He remembered her face when she spoke of Kalen's potential erasure. His resolve hardened into steel. "We need to move," Alden stated, his voice firm, pushing down the fear. "If they know you're here, they'll be watching. They might track our every move." He looked at the Vordax symbol, then back at the journal. "Ilara Vance's journal. We need the rest of it. Whatever cultural secret it holds, we need it now." Vesper nodded, her gaze fixed on him. "The fragment we have mentions a final codex, a complete record of their recovery. It was believed lost, perhaps even destroyed." "Not destroyed," Alden corrected, a spark of an idea igniting in his mind. "Just hidden. The university library has a restricted section for rare and sensitive manuscripts. It's a labyrinth almost never accessed. I've heard whispers about it, stories from old professors. It's off-limits to most students, even faculty. But if a final codex exists, that's where it would be." Vesper's green eyes widened slightly. "Restricted access. How do we bypass it?" Alden leaned back, his mind already racing through the campus blueprints he knew so intimately. "There's an old service tunnel beneath the oldest part of the main library. It leads to a sub-basement, then a rarely used staircase. It's dusty, probably full of forgotten things, but it might connect to the restricted section." He tapped his fingers on the table. "I used to explore the forgotten parts of campus when I was a freshman, trying to find quiet places to study. I know a way in." Vesper listened intently, her head cocked, processing his words with kaolinite speed. "And security? Sensors. Motion sensors mostly in the main corridors. The old tunnel might have some, but they'd be ancient, probably unreliable. The restricted section itself would be more secure, but if we can get to the entrance from an unexpected angle, we might have an advantage," Alden explained. "It's a gamble, but we don't have time for anything else." He saw the flicker of calculation in Vesper's eyes. "My senses are highly tuned. I can detect energy signatures, even faint ones. We can use that. Your knowledge of the structure, my ability to detect anomalies." She placed her hand briefly on his, a gesture of shared trust. "It is our best chance." The library was slowly emptying. The clock on the wall crept towards closing time. They had to move. Alden gathered their scattered notes, stuffing them into his backpack. Vesper tucked Vance's journal fragment carefully into a pouch on her belt. The quiet intimacy of their shared research had dissolved, replaced by a charged, desperate urgency. This was no longer just about understanding. It was about survival. They waited until the last librarian had locked the main doors, their forms hidden behind a stack of tall bookshelves. The silence that descended was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of the building's old ventilation system. Alden led the way, moving with practiced stealth through the darkened aisles. He knew this building like the back of his hand, every creak of the floorboards, every blind spot in the surveillance camera network. "The service tunnel entrance is here," Alden whispered, pointing to a nondescript door tucked behind a rarely used reference desk. It was unmarked, blending seamlessly with the wall. He produced a set of master keys he had acquired years ago from an old janitor, a relic of his early campus explorations. The lock clicked softly. Vesper's ears rotated, scanning the empty hall. "Clear," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Alden pushed the door open, revealing a narrow, dark passage. The air was stale, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten things. He pulled out a small, powerful flashlight. Its beam cut through the gloom, revealing pipes snaking across the ceiling and cobwebs clinging to every surface. "Stay close," Alden instructed, stepping inside. Vesper followed, her movements fluid and silent. The tunnel twisted and turned, a forgotten artery beneath the vibrant campus. Alden navigated by memory, his flashlight beam sweeping ahead. He pointed out loose floor panels, defunct wiring, and sections of crumbling plaster, explaining the layout as they moved. Vesper remained alert, her green eyes constantly darting, taking in every detail, her senses extended beyond what Alden could perceive. "Motion sensor ahead," Vesper whispered, her hand rising to stop Alden. He froze. "Faint energy signature. Old model. There is a blind spot to the left behind the conduit pipe." Alden nodded, impressed by her precision. He moved as she directed, pressing himself against the cold concrete wall, then quickly slipping past the sensor's range. Vesper followed, her agility allowing her to navigate the tight space with ease. Their movements were a silent, practiced dance. They descended deeper, the air growing cooler, heavier. The sound of their own breathing seemed amplified in the oppressive silence. Alden felt the weight of the Vordak's threat, the unknown danger lurking in the shadows, but also the fierce determination burning in Vesper. Her unwavering focus was a powerful shield against his own fear. "The staircase should be just ahead," Alden breathed, his voice hoarse. "It leads directly to the sub-basement below the main archives. The restricted section entrance is down there." He pushed open another heavy, unmarked door, revealing a short, winding metal staircase. The steps groaned under their weight. At the bottom, a vast, echoing space opened up before them. Rows of forgotten shelving units, draped in dust covers, stretched into the darkness. This was the sub-basement. Vesper's hand brushed his arm, a brief, reassuring contact in the cold, silent space. Alden looked at her, seeing not just the alien mission but the quiet, determined woman who had carved a seat for him in a crowded lecture hall. Their alliance, born of academic curiosity and unexpected kindness, had now forged into something more profound. It was a partnership, desperate and tense, but undeniably strong. The final entry of Alara Vance's journal, and Kalen's fate, awaited them somewhere in the oppressive silence of the restricted archives. They entered the restricted archives through a heavy, reinforced door, Alden carefully manipulating the old lock with a borrowed set of tools. The air inside was still, thick with the scent of aged paper and dust. Towering shelves, crammed with forgotten volumes, formed narrow aisles that twisted into a labyrinth. Dim emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows. "This is it," Alden whispered, awe in his voice. Alara Vance's section should be near the back, records from the early 21st century. Vesper moved with a silent grace, her green eyes scanning the vast collection. She ran a gloved hand over a leather-bound tome, a flicker of curiosity in her gaze before refocusing on their mission. The energy signature from the Vordak symbol was faint, but it was here, she confirmed, her voice low. "It means they were close." They began their search, moving methodically through the rows. Alden pulled out old card catalogs, his fingers adept at navigating the archaic system. Vesper used her enhanced senses, not just sight, but a subtle perception of energy fields, looking for any lingering trace of the Vordaks or the unique resonance of the Kalenite data within the journal. "Found it," Alden announced softly, pointing to a small, unmarked section tucked away behind a larger collection of botanical texts. "Alara Vance, the last box." He reached for a heavy, metal-bound box on the highest shelf. As his fingers brushed the latch, a faint, almost imperceptible click echoed through the silent archives. A low, insistent pulse began to vibrate through the floor. It was too subtle for human ears, but Vesper's ears twitched. Her head snapped up. Movement, she hissed, her voice sharp. An alert, a silent one. Alden froze, his hand still on the box. What kind of alert? An old pressure plate connected to a localized network, Vesper explained rapidly. It just activated. Someone is now aware of our presence. The quiet hum intensified slightly. Alden's heart hammered against his ribs. The Vordax knew. Their covert mission was no longer covert. We need the journal, Alden stated, pulling the box free. He fumbled with the clasp. The operative is moving fast, Vesper warned, her gaze fixed on the entrance they had used. One individual, approaching from the sub-basement passage. A figure emerged from the shadowy passage, dressed in a standard campus security uniform. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with an unreadable expression. He carried no weapon, but his posture was unnervingly precise, his movements economical. "Evening," the security guard said, his voice calm, almost cordial but devoid of warmth. "This section is restricted. May I ask what you are doing here?" Alden felt a cold dread settle over him. This was not a regular guard. His eyes met Vesper's. She gave a subtle shake of her head. This was the Vordax. "Just some late-night research," Alden replied, trying to sound nonchalant, but his voice wavered slightly. He held the metal box tightly. The guard took a slow step forward. "My records indicate this section has been sealed for decades. Your access is unauthorized." His gaze lingered on Vesper, a strange, calculating intensity in his eyes. "And you, young woman, you are not registered in the system at all." Vesper remained silent, her body tensed, ready. The air crackled with unspoken tension. "Run," Vesper commanded, her voice a low growl. She snatched the box from Alden's grasp. "Go." She spun, darting deeper into the labyrinth of shelves. Alden didn't hesitate. He knew the building, its hidden paths, its forgotten corners. He understood now. This was not just a chase. It was a race against time and an unknown enemy. "Follow me," Alden yelled, weaving between shelves, knocking over a stack of empty archival boxes to create a temporary barrier. The Vordax operative, surprisingly agile despite his bulk, cleared the obstruction with a single, fluid leap. "You cannot escape," the operative's voice echoed, emotionless, calm. "The information you seek will be assimilated, just as your cultures will be." Alden led Vesper towards the older, less used sections, where the shelves were taller, the aisles narrower, and the light even dimmer. He knew a maintenance shaft that led to a ventilation system, a path too small for the Vordax operative. "This way," Alden gasped, pushing open a small, barely visible access panel. "It goes up 3 levels, then drops into the main library's disused boiler room. We can get out from there." Vesper nodded, her green eyes bright with determination. She tossed the heavy box to Alden. "You go first. I will distract him." "No," Alden protested, but Vesper was already moving, a blur of dark fur, disappearing down another aisle. "He wants the data," Vesper's voice called out, surprisingly clear. "He will follow the one holding it." Alden cursed under his breath but understood her logic. He gripped the metal box, its weight suddenly immense, and squeezed himself into the narrow shaft, scrambling upwards. He could hear the Vordax operative's footsteps, closer now, but moving away from his position, following Vesper's deliberate misdirection. Alden climbed, his muscles burning, the metal box clutched to his chest. He could hear Vesper's rapid movements, the occasional clatter of something she had deliberately knocked over, drawing the Vordax away. She was buying him time. He reached the top of the shaft, pushing open another panel. He emerged into a dusty, abandoned room filled with old machinery. The boiler room. A heavy steel door led outside. Freedom was within reach. But Vesper. He heard a crash closer than before. She was still in the archive, still drawing the operative. He had the box, the final entry, but it was useless if she didn't make it out. Alden looked at the heavy door, then back at the shaft. He couldn't leave her. He had to create a bigger diversion, something that would draw the vortex away entirely, giving Vesper a chance to escape. He saw an old, heavy-duty fire alarm pull station on the wall. It was meant for the entire building. If he pulled it, the sirens would blare, the lights would flash, and every door in the building would automatically unlock. Chaos, but also a chance. He took a deep breath, clutching the box tightly. He couldn't risk the data being destroyed if Vesper needed to make a desperate move. He quickly opened the metal box. Inside, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, was a thick, leather-bound journal. He quickly pulled it out, tucking it inside his jacket. He replaced the oilcloth and closed the box, then threw it with all his might towards a far corner of the boiler room, creating a loud clang. Then, with a grim determination, he pulled the fire alarm. The piercing shriek of the alarm ripped through the silent building. Red lights flashed. Doors slammed open. Vesper, a moment before cornered in a dead-end aisle by the relentless Vordax operative, heard the deafening alarm. Her ears flattened against her head, but a surge of relief coursed through her. Alden. He was creating a diversion, a big one. The Vordax operative, momentarily disoriented by the sudden noise and flashing lights, hesitated. His focus had been entirely on Vesper, on securing the Kalenite data he believed she still carried. "You are a fool," the operative stated, his voice now colder, sharper, cutting through the alarm. "That information belongs to the collective. Resistance is futile." Vesper moved, not away but towards him. She was light, fast, her Kalenite agility unmatched. The operative lunged, expecting her to evade, to run. But she met his attack head-on, a calculated risk. Her small frame weaved under his outstretched arm. She used his own momentum against him, twisting his arm back, not to break it, but to disorient. Her intention was not violence, but control. She knew the Vordax were powerful but rigid in their thinking, dependent on calculated efficiency. Unpredictability was their weakness. She moved around him, a blur of motion, her hands striking pressure points on his neck and shoulder, a Kalenite martial art designed for disarming, not injury. The operative grunted, a flicker of surprise in his calm eyes. He stumbled back. "The data is not with me," Vesper said, her voice clear despite the blaring alarm. "It is safe, beyond your reach." The operative recovered quickly, a cold rage now replacing his placid demeanor. He lunged again, faster this time, but Vesper was already gone, slipping past him, making for an exit near the back of the archives. He spun, pursuing her, his priority still the perceived threat of Kalenite data in her possession. Alden, hearing the chase move away from his location, emerged from the boiler room, the journal clutched to his chest. He saw Vesper, a dark shadow, disappear through a service door. He sprinted after her. He found her moments later in a secluded courtyard, hidden by thick hedges. The alarm still blared inside the building, a distant wail. Vesper was leaning against a stone bench, breathing heavily but unharmed. "Alden," she breathed, relief washing over her face. "You have it." He pulled the journal from his jacket, safe and sound. Vesper nodded, her green eyes scanning the courtyard, confirming their temporary safety. "The Vordax operative. He is still searching the archives. He believes I still have the data. He will be occupied for some time." "You disarmed him," Alden stated, a thrill of awe in his voice. "I didn't see how, but you did." Vesper gave a small, tired smile. "Kalenite training. We do not destroy, Alden, we stabilize, we disarm." They sat on the cold stone bench, the journal between them. The adrenaline slowly receded, leaving them both breathless. Alden reached out, his hand gently covering Vesper's where it rested on the journal. Her fur was soft beneath his touch. "We did it," he whispered, a profound sense of accomplishment and shared relief settling over him. We have Alara Vance's final codex. Vesper's green eyes met his, a warmth blooming in their depths. We did, she confirmed, her fingers intertwining with his. You created the distraction. You retrieved the journal. Your knowledge of this place, Alden, it was indispensable. Your agility, your senses, your training, Alden countered. We're a team. Vesper leaned her head against his shoulder, a rare, intimate gesture. An unexpected alliance, she murmured, a hint of a purr in her voice. Now we must decipher this. Kalen's future depends on it. The alarm still echoed faintly in the distance, a reminder of the danger they had just faced. But here, in the quiet courtyard, under the pale glow of the campus lights, a different kind of strength had been forged. It was a strength born of trust, mutual respect, and a shared, desperate hope. The final piece of the puzzle, Alara Vance's insights into cultural resilience, was now in their hands. Kalen had a chance. And Alden, who once only sought a quiet seat in a crowded room, had found a universe of purpose and an undeniable connection with the quiet Kalenite beside him. The cool night air of the courtyard still carried the faint scent of rain and distant alarms. Vesper carefully took the journal from Alden, her fingers brushing his again. Her eyes, usually so composed, held a tremor of anticipation. She opened the ancient text, her gaze sweeping over Alara Vance's meticulous script. This is it, she breathed, a quiet reverence in her voice. The final codex. She produced her small, unfamiliar device, its surface glowing with a soft, internal light. With practiced precision, Vesper began to scan the journal's pages. The device emitted a low thrum as it absorbed the data, translating the human script into Kalenite code. Alden watched, a knot of tension in his stomach slowly loosening with each page she scanned. This was the culmination of everything, the desperate hope for Kalen. It will take time to transmit a full data package of this size, Vesper explained, her focus unwavering. But the key elements, the foundational principles of Vance's insights, can be sent now. A preliminary upload. She completed the scan, the device now holding the entirety of Alara Vance's wisdom. Vesper looked at Alden, a profound gratitude in her green eyes. Your scholarship, Alden, it found what we could not. This journal is a map, not just to a community's recovery, but to the very essence of cultural resilience. She then initiated the preliminary transmission. The device pulsed, a faint, almost imperceptible energy radiating from it. Vesper closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. Alden felt a subtle shift in the air, a sense of vast distance being bridged. Moments later, her eyes opened, a wave of profound relief washing over her features. It is received, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Kalen has it. The core principles of reciprocal exchange, individual narrative creation, the shared understanding of identity. They are already beginning to integrate it into their collective consciousness protocols. A small, genuine smile touched her lips, a rare sight that made Alden's heart ache with warmth. The Vortex sought to sever those connections, to make us uniform and therefore vulnerable. But Vance's journal details how true strength comes from the very differences, from the unique stories woven together. Kalen will adapt. We will not be assimilated. Alden felt a surge of triumph, a deep satisfaction that transcended any academic achievement. We did it, Vesper. We actually did it. You did it, Alden, she corrected, her hand reaching for his, her touch light but firm. Your understanding of humanity, your empathy, your relentless pursuit of truth. Without you, Kalen would have been lost. The fire alarm, now a distant memory, had finally silenced. The campus was quiet once more, save for the rustling of leaves in the night breeze. They remained on the bench for a long moment, the weight of their shared accomplishment settling around them. The mission was complete. Kalen had been given a chance, a shield forged from Earth's enduring spirit. Vesper eventually stood, her gaze drifting towards the campus parking lot, the very place where her impossible speed had first revealed her true nature to Alden. He followed her, sensing a shift, a new layer of unspoken meaning in her quiet demeanor. They walked slowly, the journal now tucked safely back into Alden's jacket, its secrets now shared across light years. They reached the edge of the parking lot, the same spot where the runaway shopping cart incident had occurred. The familiar surroundings felt different now, imbued with the echoes of their journey. Vesper turned to face him, her green eyes luminous in the pale campus lights. "Alden," she began, her voice softer than he had ever heard it, a delicate purr woven into her words. "My mission here is complete. Kalen is safe. The Vordak's threat, while not eliminated, is now understood. My people have the tools to protect themselves, to rebuild their collective identity from within." She paused, taking a shallow breath. Her ears twitched slightly, a subtle sign of her internal processing. "My purpose here was to find that knowledge. I found it, but I also found something else." Alden waited, his heart pounding a steady rhythm against his ribs. He knew, instinctively, what she was about to say. He had hoped for it, quietly, desperately, since the first time she had saved him a seat. "I found you," Vesper continued, her gaze unwavering. "My anchor. On Kalen, our connections are vast, collective. But here, with you, I have learned the strength of an individual bond, the depth of a shared narrative, two separate beings creating a new story together." Her hand reached out, gently cupping his cheek. Her fur was soft against his skin, warm and real. "I came to Earth seeking cultural resilience. I found it in humanity. I found it in you. I found a reason to stay." Alden's breath caught in his throat. "You would stay," he managed, the words barely a whisper. Vesper nodded, a look of profound devotion in her eyes. "My place is no longer solely on Kalen. It is here, with you, if you would have me." He didn't hesitate. Alden reached for her, pulling her close, his arms wrapping around her slender form. He felt the soft give of her fur, the strong beat of her heart against his. "Always, Vesper, always." They stood there, embraced, under the silent gaze of the campus lights. The future stretched before them, unknown but vibrant with possibilities. Alden, once just a tired commuter struggling to find his place, had found a universe of purpose and a love that transcended worlds. He looked at Vesper, her head resting against his shoulder, her quiet strength a beacon in his life. Their shared seat in the lecture hall, that simple, consistent act of kindness, had not merely been a lifeline. It had been the first brushstroke in a grand, interstellar portrait, a symbol of an enduring, profound connection. A human and a Kalenite, bound by shared purpose, forged in defiance, and now united by love. The universe had brought them together, not for conquest or conflict, but for understanding, for connection, for a future built on the quiet, powerful strength of